Good morning again. Hopefully if there's sound this time and you can hear me. If not, please let Aaron know so we can try something else. I'm Brad Bertelli, the curator here at the Keys History and Discovery Center. And today we're back on our Tuesday morning exploration of the museum here to talk about some of the great exhibits that we have on display. And hope you guys had a happy Halloween. If you do have questions, please type them in.
4th of July?
Yes.
You said Halloween.
Halloween? Oh, really? Okay. So hope you had a happy 4th of July. Halloween on the brain, apparently. So today we're going to talk about the 1733 treasure fleet. And as we talk about that, we're also going to talk about some of the connections that we keep coming back to through our exhibits and through as we're talking on these virtual tours. Does that mean we have sound?
Yes.
Cool. So Pedro Menndez, who is a name that's popped up on several of these programs, is again going to pop his head up here as we talk about the 1733 treasure fleet, because it was Pedro Menndez who really set up he was commissioned by the King of Spain to determine the safest way for these treasure fleets to travel between the old world, the new world back to the old world. And he was commissioned back in the mid-1500s to document, kind of explore, and figure out the best way to do it safely in order to avoid storms, in order to avoid piracy and other calamities that may occur. And it was Menendez who determined that the best way to do this route was to go from, and let's come over here to this map real quick, as long as we got sound. Up here on the map, it was Menendez who decided to go from Veracruz to meet in Havana. And from Havana, all the treasure fleets, all the ships would gather, and then from Havana, they would travel through the Florida Straits, come up to about Bermuda, and at Bermuda, they would start trekking east back towards Spain. Now, again, it was also Menendez who determined that it was not safe to travel after July, basically, when the hurricane season really starts to ramp up. And of course, it was Pedro Menendez's son who, shortly thereafter, determined to leave Havana in August and was engulfed by a hurricane and lost his life, which ended up bringing Pedro back to the East Coast in 1765. He establishes St. Augustine, and that story goes on. And that story, among so many others, are one of the ones featured on our touchscreen kiosk. But with the 1733 treasure fleet, like Pedro Menendez's son Juan Menendez, the commander general decided to leave Havana in September, well after it was advised to go, because this was the prime hurricane season. And it was a Friday the 13th when the treasure fleet, the ships were engulfed by a hurricane. There were 22 ships kind of gathered that were making the trek from Havana. Some of them were going just as far as St. Augustine. The vast majority were traveling home to Spain to deliver these goods, these cochineal and leathers and porcelain and dry goods and timbers and silver and all these New World treasures. So on this Friday the 13th, the hurricane wraps up. It sinks many of the ships. A couple of them were able to kind of head back to Havana and make the safety. One ship, the El Africa, which is one of the galleons, the military ships that were escorting the fleet, did manage to make it. It was the only ship who managed to make it all the way back home to Spain. The ship had suffered some damage to one of its masts, and they fixed that kind of, and then were able to successfully go back to Spain, return to Spain. Now, what is interesting about this particular fleet is many of, all of these ships had logs that would document everything they had on board. And when they recovered the treasures and the things from the cargo holds, they actually recovered more than what appeared on these logs, on these manifests. But then there still have been plenty of, is that a question? Okay, one second. There still was plenty of things to recover later on in life when Art McKee, who we're going to pan over here, kind of rediscovers the wrecked fleet in the 1930s. Now, question.
Ellen would like to know, what time of year did the ships leave Spain each year?
You know, I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know. But I know they would travel down Africa and then, like from Spain, kind of down Africa and then head west towards Bermuda and then travel down the straits to Veracruz and to other locations, Havana and Puerto Rico and those areas. But I'm not positive on when that was. I think it was 4 to 6 weeks is how long the trip took. The trip home was always a little faster because the currents of the Gulf Stream would help to kind of propel the ships along. But the Gulf Stream was also tricky because it was almost imperceptible for many of the ships, but as the ships were going up the Florida Straits, past the Florida Reef, the Gulf Stream was pushing them forward, but also pushing them towards the reefs. And so the captains really had to pay attention and to use these things, which were sounding weights, which is how they determined how deep the water was. There would be a line attached to the weights, and then they'd be marked like every meter or whatever, and then they would be thrown overboard, and then they could determine how deep the water was, and that's how they determined, you know, how close they were towards the reef and how quickly the bottom was coming up. Yes.
Ellen's got another question.
Ellen.
About how many trips a year would a ship make?
There were two fleets every year. There was the New Spain fleet, and then the Terra Firma fleet. So there were 2 fleets every year so 2 coming this way, and when they came from Spain to the New World, they were bringing supplies, they were bringing food, they were bringing men, and so they were kind of bringing supplies coming to, and then things they had taken, the leathers and the dyes and the silver and all those things they were kind of confiscating from Mexico and Central America, as well as other locations, and bringing them back to Spain to kind of pay for all these operations, because this was a very expensive operation for the king. So when these ships would be taken either due to piracy or to hurricanes, they were losing. The king was losing his money. So of course he wanted to rectify that any way that he could. So we have our good friend, the father of modern day of treasure hunting, Art McKee, who in 1938 it kind of rediscovers these sunken ships and does a lot of salvaging of the 1733 fleet. And we have some of the artifacts we have. Most of them are from the Bureau of Archaeological Research we have up in Tallahassee, where I've gone up to the warehouses there and collected many of the things we have on exhibit. But we have 2 items here, both from the 1733 fleet, that were donated by one of our locals. Linda Williams, whose husband, as a teenager, had dived on these fleets, on these shipwrecks, and kind of recovered things. And then he passed, and she had them kind of laying around the house and wanted someplace to put them, and so she contacted us, and now we have them on exhibit. We have this rail spike, which was from the El Ruby Capitana, the Capitana El Ruby, which was the Capitana of the fleet. There were 2 main galleons that would protect the treasure fleets. That was the Capitana, who led the convoy, and then the Almiranta, which is kind of like the last ship that would protect the flank of the fleet. And this is actually a part of the wood of the ship, of a railing, and one of the spikes. Now this is a type and this is from the El Ruby, and this is from the San Pedro, which was wrecked just near Indian Key. This is a type of cannonball called bar shot, and this type of cannonball was really done as a way to inflict damage upon the ship. When it was fired from the cannon, you can see it's 2 balls attached by a metal piece would twirl. And as it would twirl, it would fly into the rigging that would hold up the sails and the mast, and kind of the shot was designed to kind of take these down, take the mast down, and cause damage so the ships could not continue to sail, which made them much easier to plunder for in terms of piracy. Yes.
Linda Daly would like to know, back to the sounding weights. Do you know how much approximately those weigh?
I don't, and these are just two examples. I'm going to say, like, I don't know. I'm trying to remember when I picked them up. I held them, but that was like 7 years ago. The smaller one, I'm going to say like 7 or 8 pounds, and then the larger one, maybe 10 to 12 pound area. But this is just two examples. Some of them are much larger, and some of the, so they really came in a variety of sizes.
And what material are they made of? That might help people understand their weight.
I'm not positive.
Do they look like there's some sort of metal?
Definitely some kind of metal, but I'm not sure what kind of metal they are. But yeah, they're hefty, so they would have to be able to drop down and kind of fight the current and kind of like, think of a sinker on a fishing rod. Same concept as a sinker if you're fishing. It's just a big sinker that would help to sink that line. Now the bar shot, which is a really kind of cool thing, that we have on exhibit, and people still are out there looking and salvaging and kind of investigating these treasure fleets, these sunken ships. And there is one really cool story I'd like to talk about, because people talk about finding treasures on the Florida Keys. And Art McKee told a story back in 1975 about some treasure found on Plantation Key, which was kind of near where his treasure museum was, which is now the site of the Montessori School, that castle-like building right across the street of the Overseas Highway from Betsy the Lobster. Now, in the mid-1970s, there was a bulldozer operating on a high ridge of sand along the beach, and it was kind of moving sand, and it had taken like 10 inches of sand away, and it uncovered a bunch of black pieces in the ground. So the guy driving the bulldozer, he stopped the bulldozer, got out, and when he looked down, he picked up one of the black pieces, and he scratched it off. Turned out to be a Spanish coin, a piece of 8, and he collected about 74 of these pieces of these silver Spanish coins. And what Art McKee theorized was that this was probably washed ashore as one of the ships was sinking off of Plantation Key. Some of the people on board had swam ashore and taken some of their, a lot of the captains and a lot of the crew members would have stolen, little pieces of chunks of treasure and pieces of collections of coins, things that they were kind of taking home that were not being documented for the king, but kind of documented for their own purposes. And as they tried to swim ashore, he surmised that perhaps they drowned, and and the bodies washed up on shore, and as they did, and the bodies kind of disintegrated over time, that the Spanish coins were kind of left behind. Now there was a small piece of a human skull fragment that was found near the area as well. So there may be some credence to that story, I'm not sure. What's really kind of cool was that a year or two ago, we were contacted by a couple of brothers down in Key West named the Maloneys. And their history goes way back, actually way back in history. One of their forefathers was actually the clerk for Jacob Hausman on Indian Key back in the 1830s. But it turns out that those two brothers were riding their motorcycles on Plantation Key during that time, and when those silver coins were discovered. So it was kind of and they were like, yeah, we were the guys, and I was telling them about that story, and they're like, yeah, we were the guys, we were there with the bulldozer. So it was kind of a cool connection. Also, another great connection is that we had Corey Malcolm down from the Mel Fisher Museum in Key West, who came up to give a talk during our lecture series. And after he saw the exhibit that we had created, he called me up later and said that he had an anchor from one of the ships from the 1733 fleet, and they needed a home for it, and contacted me and asked if I wanted to have that on display. It was from the Infante, which wrecked near, kind of between Rodriguez Key and Tavernier Key off of Key Largo, right in close proximity to the El Ruby, the Capitana of the fleet. And that was just another great way that museums stay connected and they share, because the more that we can get out to the public, the more that we can show, the more that we can talk about, the richer our community becomes and the richer our history becomes when it's on display and available. Now, when you come back in, we're looking forward to seeing you as you venture down into the Keys and stop in to learn more of the great history that we have on display here at the Keys History and Discovery Center. We're located on the grounds of the Islander Resort on Upper Matacumbe Key, about mile marker 82, right across from the Lorelei, where that big mermaid is on the side of the road. We have a great presentation tomorrow night at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock? 6 o'clock. With Ryan Hart, our archaeologist Ryan Hart, who's going to continue his discussion about an prehistoric Indian site that he's been working on down on Stock Island, which is near Key West, which is right beside Key West. Yes?
Ellen would like to know, what is the artifact next to the sounding weights?
That is a pulley block. So this is kind of where, which would help the line, the rigging, and the line on there, which was much bigger than we thought, and was kind of when our exhibits are created. I was talking with the guys who are building the exhibits, who were in St. Pete, and giving them measurements and showing them pictures, and they developed these cases, and it turned out that this case wasn't quite big enough to house that, so we had to do some last minute fine tuning. But the guys that do our exhibits, SNL Millwork up in St. Pete, do a fantastic job, and we're really pleased with how beautiful everything comes out, which is why I like to use them. So if you guys, tomorrow night, Wednesday, we have Ryan Hart's going to do his great presentation, and then next Wednesday we'll be back with the cocktails with the curator. I know Ellen has some questions lined up for me, which I have notes on, and I will get back to those next week. And hope you guys have a great week, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you so much.